first lesson, not to learn, but not to forget, is that the mankind generally don't learn lessons from history. Can we change that habitude? I'm not optimist, but we have always tried. At least here, we have a golden opportunity to learn from each other, and I think it is enough for us in this moment. I agree with Mr. Ben Isa that we always should speak about Middle East and North Africa. When the people say Middle East, they understand North Africa as well. But I think that it should be mentioned always because it gives another weight to what we are speaking about. And then what is absolutely clear is the Mediterranean is in the Brodelian meaning of the term is neglected, because Mediterranean is not only the Middle East, but it's Greece, it's Italy, it's part of Spain, and so on. I think that the Mediterranean dimension, for different reasons, has been even here neglected, but we should discuss that afterwards. According to the witty and classical formulation of David Fromkin, which is at the same time the title of his book, A Peace to End All Peace, it is partly I think the answer to one of your questions. The First World War buried two empires, the Ottoman and the Austro-Hungarian, that in their coordinates and in their way provided for longer or shorter period general stability of the Middle East and the Balkans as well. While the borders between countries that were then, after the First War, drawn up, became a source of constant instability. 1 century after the end of the First World War, in the process of creating multipolar world through macro-regionalization, I am now introducing that concept that could be debated, but we don't have time. It is the hypothesis of several scholars as analysts, one of them being the Parag Khanna in his book, How to Run the World, from 2011. Well, in this multipolar world, which is now taking shape through this process of macro-regionalization, in which several great states or powers or aggregation of states attempt to play the role of the centers of gravitation, Middle East and the Balkans remain out of total actual and potential control for any of those countries, making it a sin for their rivalries. Yes, indeed, actually in this very moment, the Middle East and North Africa are not the focus of interest of international community. But I think that it could change, as Mr. Issa said. Suddenly, it can re-become the focus. All those, geopolitically speaking, in the planetarian framework, they are not. Imagine, for instance, the collapse of Saudi Arabia, because the Arab Spring is not over. Well, imagine only the explosion or the implosion of the Saudi Arabia. I'm absolutely sure that the Middle East will become overnight the focus of interest of international community, all the big players, particularly some of them. Is it the old game on again? Is the classical geopolitics at work again? I wouldn't be enthusiastic if it is, as Mr. Moratino said, but in many respects it is. Because of that, we should not forget that some basic notions of the classical geopolitics, although it seems shameful to repeat that here among the people, knowledgeable people that are gathered here, specialists. But you should remember that according to Mackinder and the Euro-Asian world island theory and pivot area and heartland, which extends from the Volga to the Yangtze, from the Himalayas to the Arctic, he said, my concern with the general is the general physical control rather than the causes of universal history. And 14 years later, it was in 94, but after the 14 years later, at the end of the Great War, when he was profoundly concerned with what he saw at the end, and the need was, according to his view, felt for an effective barrier of nations between Germany and Russia, Mackinder summarized his theory as follows. It's very famous. Who rules East Europe commands the heartland. Who rules the heartland commands the world island. Who rules the world island controls the world. This model has undergone several modifications since Mackinder. I will mention only the most famous one by Nicholas Spikeman in 1942. For him, the key region of world politics was the coastal region bordering the heartland, which he called the rimland. He changed Mackinder's formula accordingly. Who controls the rimland rules Eurasia. Who rules Eurasia controls the destinies of the world. In the Middle East and in the Balkans, we are in the rimland. And this is very interesting. Who really controls the rimland? And the rimland isn't controllable at all. We've organized 2 years ago the conference, the Balkans and the Middle East. Are they mirroring each other? Interesting conclusions were reached on the typological level. But Israeli and Serbian scholars taking part here in the town of Peć, in Kosovo and Metohija, and in Belgrade. Well, I will now come to the main subject, which is how we can look at the Middle East and North Africa actually at the centenary of the big war. I will just put some, because you know it is always the privilege and the handicap to speak last. It is a privilege because you heard very interesting things and now you meditate, you can even enlarge your speech. But the handicap is that everybody is expecting logically to be the briefest and the shortest in your expose, and so I'll try just to do only some remarks. What is important, what happened after the First World War? In the First World War, the role of Islam and the Muslim states in the First World War were perceived, as it was said yesterday here by the predecessors, merely as a tool, instrumentally, and not as an autonomous actor on the world scene. For instance, Germany tried to foment the rebellion against enemies, and Britain in the other parts of the Middle East, and to weaken them that way. Then came the oil. Then came the colonization, the decolonization, the neocolonialism, neo-imperialism. Today, I think that the Islamic world, although it could seem differently, and the Muslim states are more important and challenging demographically than politically, as Mr. Sachs put yesterday in his speech during our dinner. And the massive, uncontrolled, and perhaps uncontrollable emigration towards Europe is a problem that Europe is facing, and not only Europe, but all the Mediterranean. When we speak about Middle East, it has been mentioned, I won't get back to that, it was the foundation of Israel, and the permanent tension and wars with its Arab neighbors, and practically the deadlock in the roadmap towards peace in the Israelo-Palestinian relations, although to, I think, all knowledgeable people and clever people, the common sense says the only, as it has been said here, the two-states solution is possible, but not foreseeable, unfortunately, yet. In my eyes, the role of political Islam and the Islamic radicalization, terrorism, has been overemphasized because it can be really the threat and the challenges only if some other presuppositions have been fulfilled. And it not depends on the terrorists and of the Islamists, but other players which create the ground for that. Because the Islamic world, it's living its internal disorder, its fitna. As you remember, and Gilles Capel put even that at the title of his book, The Fitna. There is not a monolithic block of Islamic countries. It's more devastated, as Mr. Ben Issa said. If we speak about security, interest, and identity, it was said yesterday, as the motives for political activity for the Muslim world, the identity is so crucial that I don't think that with its identity could now really threaten anybody seriously in the world. It has been invented because some people thought that after the Cold War, in this logic of black and white, the Manichaean thinking, now you have to invent an enemy number one. For some people, it could have been Islam, but definitely in my eyes, it's not. Now we have the emergence of the Arab Spring, so-called Arab Spring, which now lived its third winter. There is the problem of leadership. We don't have viable states, very few viable states, particularly after the interventions in Iraq, in Libya, now the problem with Syria and other states, practically all strong leadership have been destroyed in the region. Then we have the very deepening and profound front, Sunni Shia, it has been mentioned yesterday by Mr. Vuk Jeremic, stretching practically from Yemen to Afghanistan. Very serious and very dangerous split in the Muslim world. But I will here speak about one salient feature. It's very close to my academic interests, and it is Turkey. Why? Because it can be the illustration for what's going on actually in the Middle East. I won't speak very much about so-called neo-Ottomanism because we don't have time. It has been exposed in the book by Ahmed Davutoğlu, Strategic Depth. But although it is increasingly used in discussions about Turkey, the neo-Ottomanism had not been given a precise and unambiguous definition. However, the meaning of the term is clear in most cases. Neo-Ottomanism is mostly taken to signify a complex macro-ideological platform according to which present-day Turkey, as a legitimate civilization and heir of the Ottoman Empire, should reaffirm its entire spiritual, cultural, and political legacy so that it could secure and effectively play the role of a global force to reckon with, and so on and so on. I won't speak about neo-Ottomanism. In my eyes, it's very logical and, in a certain sense, very legitimate idea of Turkey nowadays. But is it realistic? If it's not realistic, why it's not realistic? It is the question, and I will try to answer only in few words, although it deserves a discussion. You know, in regional terms, the priorities of new Turkish foreign policy are the Middle East, the Caucasus, and the Balkans, regions which were part of the Ottoman Empire at some point in the past. Regarding the regional implementation of the principles of strategic depth doctrine, it is important to understand that Turkey primarily operates within the intention to realize its own interests even when its activities fall in with the strategic projection of a major global power for that region. If these Turkish interests can be fitted into a convenient, wider scenario, even better. But if not, Turkey will not hesitate to deviate from the plans of major powers. This has been amply demonstrated on several occasions in the past 10 years, especially in the Middle East. Turkey might be a regional commissioner on occasion, but never an unconditionally obedient one. Neo-Ottomanism precludes that sort of obedience. But neo-Ottomanists do not hesitate to use tactical maneuvering and compromise with the most powerful countries. And what happened? Turkey really achieved some goals, made really progress in the Balkans, in the Middle East. It's one of the very important countries now in the world. But it failed, particularly after the outspring of the Arab Spring. And when I come now to some remarks made by Mr. George Friedman today, I think that he is right in one thing. He said that the new, refreshed NATO for the Second Cold War counts very much as pivotal countries on Poland, Romania, and Turkey. Is Turkey then autonomous, or Turkey will have almost the same role in the Second World War as it used to have in the First Cold War? Or the dream of neo-Ottomanism perhaps is only the illusion born between the two Cold Wars? I think this unsuccessful neo-Ottoman attempt by Turkey to impose itself as a macro-regional power is proof that there are no factors on the horizon that could provide for a long-term regional stability of the Middle East. The interior political weakening of European Union is also an indication that it will find it very hard to fulfill that same role in the Balkans. For instance, yesterday we had a visit of the Slovenian President Borut Pahor here, and in a very polite way, in his speech at the University of Belgrade, he practically said that the further enlargement of the European Union after the outcome of the elections for the European Parliament is practically closed chapter in the foreseeable future. Then we shouldn't count in the foreseeable future to really resolve our problems to the European Union. Then Balkans and the Middle East remain this rimland, uncontrollable for a while, but very explosive, very problematic. And it was put now by the moderator, if we could find our own strength to solve these problems, that would be really ideal and very nice. But all the history teaches us differently. Thank you very much.